Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So thanks, Lexi, for having me. So I'm Meg. I'm born and raised in New York, live in
Hmm.
Miami right now. I've been in South Florida for about almost 8 years. I got diagnosed with endometriosis in 2015 after a 10-year
Hmm.
long journey. Went to many, many specialists, which we'll definitely cover, I'm sure, today.
Hmm.
But I'm a real estate broker, marketing consultant, and I'm also the associate director of the Endometriosis Coalition, which is a
Wow.
501(c)(3) focused on awareness and education of endometriosis.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. I love that.
And
What exactly is a 501c? Oh my gosh, my voice.
you're good. So a 501(c)(3) is a nonprofit,
Okay.
just in the eyes of the government, so that
Hmm.
non-for-profit corporation.
Okay, perfect. That's what I
Yeah,
thought. I just wanted to make sure.
you're good.
So that is super cool. I definitely want to ask you more about that
Yeah.
later on. And you said you were diagnosed with endo in 2015 after like 10 years. When did you even suspect that something was wrong?
So I got my period in seventh grade for the first time,
Hmm.
and my first period was a disaster. But for me, like I'm an only child. My mother had pretty significantly horrible periods. So
Yeah.
I just thought that that was what was normal. And then I was going to school and I went to Catholic school. So I was wearing uniforms. I couldn't pick
Oh
my
yeah.
own thing for school. And I was having accidents very frequently when I had my cycle. And then I would talk to other girls where we were starting to feel comfortable talking about these things with one another, and they weren't
Yeah.
having these issues. And so at the first time I went to an OBGYN to explore the issues I was having, I was 13 or 14 years old.
Hmm. Yeah. And what did they kind of say?
It's normal.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, well, it's normal for my mom. It's normal for me, but it's not normal for my friends at school. Is this just my normal? Is this normal?
Hmm.
But as I got older and as years went by, I mean, I was just very persistent. So like if a doctor gave me a comment saying, oh, it's not normal, then I would just go to another doctor because
Yeah.
I just knew something was seriously wrong. And then it ended up being 7 OBGYNs later till the first time I even heard the word endometriosis. And I didn't know what it was. I
Hmm.
actually, when they mentioned it, it was the first time I was more than 5 minutes in the doctor's office where they actually went through more questions and were very thorough about my symptoms.
Yeah.
And they told me and they showed me a little picture book of endometriosis. And I was like, what's that? And she explained to me what it was.
Yeah.
It's similar to the inside of the uterus growing on the outside of the uterus. The only way to clinically diagnose it is through laparoscopic surgery. When she said surgery, I fainted. No
Oh,
exaggeration. I fainted.
oh
And
my
I was
gosh.
like, what better place for me to faint than a doctor's office? Because
Yeah.
I have immediate care right there. But as I regained consciousness, she tried to explain it again. And then I
Hmm.
fainted again. And she's like, maybe we do this on a telemed.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing it on a telemed just like 3 days later. And I was like, you know what? I'm only 23. Like, I don't need
Mhm.
surgery right now. I'm fine. And about 2 weeks after that, I ruptured an endometrioma cyst
Oh,
that
wow.
it was the worst one I'd ever experienced. I was unconscious. I couldn't regain consciousness. So I was rushed to the hospital. And then
Ugh.
that's when I decided to proceed with talking to some surgeons for consultations and
Mhm.
moving forward with surgery.
Wow.
Yeah, it was severe.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so you may not know this either, but were they able to see those cysts like on imaging at all? Like, did you?
So it's very interesting. I didn't have an ultrasound prior to that, so I
Hmm.
didn't know. But when I was at the hospital, they did do a sonogram and they saw evidence of a ruptured cyst.
Okay.
Um, they say that it could have been a follicular cyst that ruptured because even
Mm.
then they were just not sure because I wasn't clinically diagnosed.
Right.
But based on my experience with follicular cysts versus endometriomas,
Yeah.
and based on how my pathology report looked, I'm positive it was an endometrioma. So positive that I've even consulted other professionals where they do agree with me on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that it was. I was just curious because I
Yeah.
know that a lot of people struggle with endometriosis, and most of the time like anything related to endo doesn't pop up on imaging.
Yeah.
So I know for me, I unfortunately, when I was going through the majority of my endo stuff, like trying to get diagnosed with something, I was in college and I went to school in a very, very rural town. So we had
Mhm.
like two OBGYNs. So I really only had like two options. And the one that I had was just like not great. And I had a lot of ultrasounds though, like a lot of ultrasounds. And she's like, yeah, we still don't see anything. And I'm like, okay, well, Google says you won't see it. So what else can you do?
You know, it's so amazing that you were 10 steps ahead because I didn't even know what endometriosis was. So when she said that to
Hmm.
me, like every time I went for ultrasounds and they told me everything was normal, like I didn't know anything about endo. So I was just like, all right, well, everything's normal, but like I can't have a bowel movement without fainting. So like that's
Yeah.
not normal.
Yeah.
So when I ended up having that situation in her office, it was like a whole light bulb went off, but I was still in denial. I didn't want to believe it until 2 weeks later when I ruptured that cyst.
That makes a lot of sense. I honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, like I definitely fought for the surgery to diagnose endo, but I don't remember when I originally like started feeling like, oh yeah, it is endo and we need to have the surgery so that I can have like a yes or no answer. Because I also was at the point like my OBGYN was like trying to talk me out of the surgery because she's like, surgery doesn't help. It hurts. Like, you may not have it. So there's no point in doing the surgery. And I was over here like, even if I don't have it, I want to know because something is still wrong.
Yeah.
So I was very, I also was 19. So looking back at it, like,
Wow.
I'm 26 now. So, like, if I was going through this at this moment, I don't know if I would have been so gung ho on doing surgery. I feel like once you obviously like when you're 25 your frontal lobe finishes developing and then you just
Yeah.
start feeling like oh surgery is kind of dangerous and like bad things could happen. I didn't think that then,
Yeah.
so I was just very like do the surgery and just tell me yes or no because then if it's not
Yeah.
endometriosis we can move on to something else because I'm still in pain.
So did
um
you have the surgery at 19?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, you are so lucky. I mean, if I knew at 19, I think my college experience would have been a whole lot different.
Yeah.
My college experience, I actually that's when my symptoms significantly progressed was in college.
Yeah.
It came to a point where I never wanted to, they always, all these other OBGYNs wanted to give me birth control to just mask the symptoms, but in my
Hmm.
head, it didn't sit well with me. So I always politely declined.
Yeah.
Then one day, my senior year of college, I was in a mandatory class that I was a very good student, went to Villanova, super,
Yeah.
much cared about my grades. I walked up in the middle of that attendance mandatory class and I said, I have to leave. I really don't feel well. So I left. The professor called me after the fact saying, that's very unlike you. Are you okay? And I explained to him what happened. Went to an OBGYN the next day just to get on birth control because I
Yeah.
was desperate. I didn't know I had endo. I didn't know what was wrong, but all
Hmm.
these other doctors had said that it would help me. It didn't help me. Um, I was only on it for 5 months and I had a severe reaction, so I got off of it. Thankfully, about 2 years later was when this happened, and then I had
Yeah.
my diagnosis after that.
I will say that getting diagnosed definitely helped a lot
Mhm.
of things because then, like all of a sudden doctors took me a lot more seriously. When you have the diagnosis on your record, you can go
Yeah,
to any other doctor and you're like, I'm in excruciating pain. And they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like you have this.
exactly.
Um, so it did make my life easier in that sense, but I mean, it didn't like I still was in a bunch of pain and
Yeah.
thankfully, I think actually my senior year of college when I was, for some reason, I think it was like 2 years after the surgery, and I started to get a lot of pain again. Like everything was like coming back like double what it was before. Now I'm kind of also realizing that the surgery that I had was obviously like the exploratory laparoscopic surgery, but they did like cauterization, so they burned out some of the endo. Now I'm realizing that that could have caused also some scar tissue. So like we could have made the issue a little bit worse as well. So a couple years after surgery, I was in a bunch of pain again, on the ground, in a lot of pain. Wasn't
Yeah.
really sure what to do. I also was doing like pelvic floor physical therapy.
Yeah.
And I tried like I tried like muscle relaxers, like a whole bunch of other things because my doctor was like, just keep doing this.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, the muscle relaxers were not the best idea, but again, I was young and I didn't really know. So I was just listening to whatever my OBGYN said. But
Of
yeah,
course.
my senior year, I was missing a lot of classes. And at my university, I was pre-med. So I was like, I can't miss classes. I want to go to medical school like this.
Of course.
I can't do this. There also were quite a few classes that if you missed more than like 4 or 5 classes, you just like auto failed. So
Mm,
it got to the point
the
where
pressure.
I had to go to like my dean and be like, I have a chronic illness. Like I have to be excused from things if I'm in pain.
Yeah.
So that definitely helped. Like if I didn't have that,
Yeah.
I think I would have failed a lot of classes.
Well, I think, this is something that I tell a lot of people because ever since I had my diagnostic surgery, which was in
Hmm.
2015, I just decided because I didn't know at the time anyone that had endo, because I didn't even know what it was until 3 months prior to that, that I was going to do a lot of advocacy online.
Yeah.
And that ended up creating a lot of friendships and relationships on social media through, the endometriosis world. But ever since then, so this is almost 9 years ago now, I've had thousands of patients DM me even before they go in for the diagnostic procedure. And I always
Yeah.
tell people, you have to be your own advocate. It is so critical to be your own advocate. If you're not getting the answers that you need from a doctor, then
Hmm.
just keep pushing because you know your body better than anyone else. And so I applaud you so much for doing that because if you hadn't had that, then your situation in school might have been a whole lot more different.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and like I thought I was doing everything I could, but I didn't find the doctor about endo until I was
Hmm.
23 years old. Even then I knew something was wrong and I was trying to, do the best I could too, but without having any
Yeah.
knowledge of what it was, I didn't know.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think that's why it's so important to just like talk about it more so that
Yeah.
people who are having these symptoms like you did, but
Yeah.
they know something's wrong, but they have no idea like what to even ask about. Because
Yeah,
once you
exactly.
start asking your doctors about it, then maybe you can start getting some answers. And there are like a battery of other things that could cause similar symptoms to endo. So I'm not saying every single person has it, but at least hearing what it is and being
Yeah.
able to like go ask about it. And then, I mean, God, I hope eventually they figure out a different way to diagnose it. But
I know. And the other thing too, Lexi, is that it's like it's a whole lot more common than people
mhm,
think. So like even a few of my best friends, I'll tell you, they were having issues, not as severe as mine, but my case was, let me tell you, my case was very
mhm.
significant. It was very severe. But ever since I went through what I went through, a few of my friends were like, wait, my periods aren't normal either. And then they ended up going through with the procedure and they ended up having
Mhm.
endo too. And I think that we just don't think about like 1 in 10. It really is almost 1 in 9 now. That's the statistic.
Yeah.
That's really, really common.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
a lot, a lot.
Yeah,
Um, it's just
I
it's
know.
sad. And I really hope that people do hear this podcast and like
Yeah.
hear all of it's actually kind of crazy too. Since starting this podcast, I've obviously like followed a lot of people that
Yeah.
I found in the endo realm, and it there's a lot of people. So
There's a
I'm
lot.
like, I wish that I would have had that in like high school and college because it would have felt a lot less isolating.
I wish
Yeah.
I had it too. But let me tell you, I think it's the community online has significantly grown since we had surgery. Do you know what year you had your surgery?
Yeah, it was 2018.
Okay, so 3 years after mine. So
Hmm.
yeah, around 2017 was when I started to see more and more people be open about it and talking about it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm an open book. I'll talk about
Hmm.
anything. I'm not shy. I'll talk to anyone. I'll talk about anything. But a lot of people are,
Yeah.
and there was more of a stigma talking about women's periods on the internet. For me,
Hmm.
I'm just like, yep, here's my period. It was horrible. Like but not
Yeah.
everyone is comfortable and open, or they're on their own journey, they want to deal with things a little bit more privately. But as years have gone by, and people with larger followings that have come out and
Yeah.
talked about their journey with endometriosis, I think it's helped us a lot.
Yeah. I think it has too. I remember Julianne Hough like talking about
Yeah.
having endometriosis. I don't remember what year that was, but I was like, oh my gosh, Julianne
Yep.
Hough has endometriosis. So I think that that also helps the community a lot, just like having
Mhm.
somebody with a lot of publicity being able to talk about something like that.
Have you seen Below the Belt, the documentary yet?
Oh my gosh. So I can't access it. I know about it, but I
Yeah.
tried to like watch it and it wouldn't let me access it. So I'm still trying to figure out how to watch that. But
So
yeah.
I know that there was a partnership with PBS, or might be able to be a way to stream it on there. But
Mm,
for those who don't know what Below the Belt is,
mhm,
it's a documentary produced by Endo. Shannon Cohn
mhm.
she's a queen. She's an endometriosis warrior herself. Executive produced by nonpartisan Hillary Clinton, the late Senator Orrin Hatch, Elizabeth Warren, Mitt Romney. They all came together to
Wow.
get involved for this documentary, put their politics aside to help women with endometriosis and to really just help spread the word.
Hmm.
And basically what the documentary does, and I won't spoil it, of course, but it does follow the journey from diagnosis through the proper treatment. And so it took years to make, just based on documenting the symptoms when the patients were at their worst, all the way through to how their life has improved through proper
Wow.
treatment. So anyone who can access it, I highly recommend it because it is so well done. I cry every time I
Hmm.
watch it. I'm like, I can relate to them so much. Even one of my friends, Jenna, she's in it as one of the patients that's journey who's followed throughout the
Oh,
documentary.
wow.
And I've known her since when she was dealing with her tough symptoms all the way through now. And it's just it's super interesting to see.
Yeah. I really, really want to watch it. And
Yeah.
now that we're talking about it, I'm gonna try to figure out how I can link
Yeah.
it in the show notes somehow so
Yeah.
that people can watch it. So yeah, look for that in the show notes. We'll figure that out.
Yes.
I also wanted to ask you, so since having your surgery and getting diagnosed with endo, how have your symptoms been since then? And like what kind of treatments have you tried?
So that's a really good question. So I'll kind of take you even before my surgery,
Okay.
because there's a whole journey of diet, lifestyle, treatment in and of itself, even before I
Mm-hmm.
was diagnosed. So when I was going through the worst of my symptoms, and now I know why, I was allergic to like every food under the sun. Like everything I ate would make my stomach bloat, like
Mm-hmm.
painfully bloated. I looked pregnant level bloating.
Mm-hmm.
So I eliminated a lot of foods to a point where I even went vegan, like to the extreme of vegan.
Yeah.
Um, I look back on it now, it didn't really help me, but at the same time, like when I did have my surgery in 2015, I had endometriosis lesions. I mean, there were hundreds of them. I'm not exaggerating. I could
Ugh.
even show you a picture. On my pelvic wall, ovaries, uterus, fallopian tubes, my appendix, my rectum, my colon. So that's why I was having a lot of food intolerances, because the
Mm-hmm.
lesions were literally on my GI tract,
Yeah.
creating this irritation. I ended up having an appendectomy too in my procedure. So when I had the surgery, I I was like, well, let's see, because now I know where the lesions were, and it could be a possibility of what was causing a lot of food intolerances that I had. Let me
Mm-hmm.
try to introduce certain things into my diet on a safe day in case it doesn't agree with me, and
Yeah.
see what works and what doesn't. And what I found was after the procedure, so I started doing this until about a month after. So when I was recovered enough where I was like, all right, I can try this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I found that like 90% of the foods that I was once not really able to tolerate, I was able to
Mm-hmm.
tolerate again, which really blew
Wow.
my mind, because I was like, besides the 7 OBGYNs that I went to try to figure out what was wrong with me, I
Mhm.
also went to a couple of GI doctors because of the GI issues I was having. And I was like, well, maybe
Yeah.
this isn't periods, maybe this is GI, like maybe I have
Mhm.
IBS. And they did try to diagnose me with that, but now I know that that's not what I was dealing with. Um,
Mhm.
so as years gone by, I went on my own health journey of figuring out what, what do I need? Now, after my procedure, I felt physically amazing, like completely blown away. I was able to work again. I was able to just do life, like not turn down
Mhm.
plans. Like, so I did somewhat take advantage of that because I thought I was invincible and everything was fine. I could do whatever. So, I kind of neglected taking care of my health, like eating well for a little while.
Yeah.
And fast forward about 6, 7 years post-op, I I noticed that my cycles were not healthy again. I
Mhm.
wasn't having like agonizing pain, but like I was noticing because now I'm married. Why is my fertile window short? What's going on? Something's off.
Yeah.
And so then that's kind of when I had like a whole rebirth of like taking care of my health again. And I learned a lot about how hormonal health is so vital, not just to dealing with endometriosis, but your overall life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've made a lot of drastic lifestyle changes to adjust that, and it's been extremely helpful for me.
Wow. I mean, my
Yeah.
mind is also blown about you being able to eat things again.
Yeah.
And also, oddly enough, I've heard so many people talk about either getting their appendix out as well,
Mhm.
or like doctors thinking about taking their appendix out. That actually happened to me in high school
Yeah.
before I was diagnosed. I was in the hospital for like a week and I was just in a bunch of pain. Looking back on it, I was on my period.
Right.
I don't know why no one thought to like think about maybe it
Yeah.
was related to that, but they literally, after being there for a week, they were like, okay, we're just going to take out our appendix because we don't know what is going on. And my mom, a year before this, I had my gallbladder taken out for like
Oh my
similar,
gosh.
yeah, for like similar reasoning. So my mom was basically like, you guys can't just keep taking organs out. Like,
Yeah,
what do you
exactly.
mean? And so she basically ended up just taking me home and being like, we'll figure something else out. I'm not
Yeah.
sure because they weren't like, oh, something's wrong with her appendix. We have to take it out. They were just like, maybe this is what's causing the pain. Like, if the gallbladder wasn't causing the pain, maybe this is. And
So
my
like
mom,
an experimental organ removal of
yeah,
me.
my mom was just like dumbfounded. She's like, no, no.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Especially at that age.
yeah.
No, that's crazy.
Anyways, I've heard a lot of people say about getting their appendix
Mhm.
out though, which is really interesting because I'm like, what is it about? I mean, for you, they knew to
Mine
take
was
it out
covered.
because yeah,
Yeah.
yours was covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Mine is actually
So,
published in a book. My lesions, a picture of my lesions are covered in Dr. Setchkin's book, The Doctor Will See You Now.
oh
If you
my
flip through,
gosh.
there's pictures of some pathology, and actually one of the photos in the pathology is mine from my case, and it's just like hundreds of lesions. Like,
Oh my God.
yeah, it was intense.
You
And I
poor
was only
thing.
23. Yeah, and it was crazy because when I woke up in the OR and sorry, not in the OR, in the recovery room,
Yeah.
he came to me and he was like, because obviously like this was my diagnostic procedure. I was
Yeah.
hoping they would find it, but that's,
Yeah.
that's the gamble, and that's the same fear that every endo patient deals with going in for their first surgery is, are they
Mm-hmm.
gonna find it, because they need to have that like clarity and
Mm-hmm.
confirmation, validation really, of okay, you have it, so this is what you do next.
Yeah.
So he came in, he told me that it was everywhere, and I ended up having like a full-blown panic attack. But like in a good way, like
Yeah.
I can't believe it, all this time, like all these years. um
Mm-hmm.
and then when I had my post-op appointment and I saw the photos and the videos, I was like, wow, that makes so much sense now. So it's pretty crazy.
Oh my gosh. That's
Hmm.
actually crazy. So the book, I'll also link in the show notes
Yeah.
for people who want to read it. I'm also gonna have to go buy that because I want to see it. That's actually crazy. So how this brings up a whole nother set of questions. How did you kind of like cope with having, because obviously it was kind of the same for me too. Like when I came out of surgery, I really had to fight for that surgery. So then when I came out and she was like, okay, yes, you have stage 4 endometriosis, like it was attached to all these organs, yada
Yeah.
yada. I I was like, oh my gosh. I remember looking at my boyfriend. We've been
Yeah.
together since 2015. So it was actually so funny. He was the only one at surgery with me. We were like 19. And
Wow.
I know, he's such a trooper.
Yeah.
I just remember like looking at him and I was like, I'm not crazy. Like there is
Yeah.
something wrong with me. And
Yeah.
and the doctor, I kind of like was like happy about it. Like I was like celebrating it
Yeah.
a little bit. And she looked at me and she
Yeah.
was like, oh, I don't know why we're celebrating. Like this is gonna be with you forever. Like you realize that, right? And I was just like, okay,
You're
like wait it.
supposed to
I know
that
I'm like, okay,
yeah.
yes, it is bittersweet, but you are allowed to like
Oh, like
be
let's
happy about
celebrate
that a
the
little
fact
bit.
that you have some answers so that you can
Hmm.
create a game plan to deal with the disease
Yeah.
you now have been confirmed to have. That would
Yeah.
drive me nuts.
Yeah. I just, uh, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back
Of
with me and that
course.
doctor. Cause I was just like, you literally were just inside my body, cutting, like
Yeah.
burning stuff out. And then you
Yeah.
come out and I'm happy that I
Yeah.
actually had something that I had to fight you to even
Yeah.
do the surgery on. And you look at me and you're like, yeah, this is not good news. Like you will have this forever. And I'm like, no, I know in that
But it's
area,
good
but it's
news that
good
you
news
have
because now we can,
validation.
yeah, now we can figure out how to like actually move forward. And she basically was like, she knew that I wanted to be a doctor and she was like, you will never be able to go to med school like this.
Oh my
Like
God.
you
See,
will be in too
this
much
is,
pain. It's just a nightmare. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole area of medical gaslighting and
Mhm.
I mean it's borderline abusive. Like how dare that doctor tell you something about what's going to limit you from achieving your dreams? Like that is
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Yeah, uh, it
No,
was
I'm
not
so
it was
sorry.
not the best. But I don't know, it is kind of like when you get that diagnosis, it's a bittersweet feeling, right? Because you're like
Right.
so happy about it. It is validating. But then you do eventually come to the realization that like the pain will come back at
Yeah.
some point and it will keep growing and you will have to keep figuring out different types of treatments that kind of work for you. So what are some treatments that you have tried? What are some things?
So I like to take a very East meets West approach to things.
Mhm.
So I like to go a little bit more holistic before I go and try medications first.
Mhm.
Because in a lot of ways throughout my life that has worked for me. So really like post-op, I didn't do any sort of treatment for a very long time, but I do specifically have this chart that for my hormones and for my cycles, and it's called Creighton Charting. So
Oh,
have you heard of Creighton Charting?
no, I haven't.
So basically, Creighton charting was developed at Creighton University, where you're tracking your cycles, like from menstruation all the way through the luteal phase, and measuring
Mhm.
cervical mucus. And basically, what that tells you is, here's how long your fertile window is, and then
Mhm.
there's a certified doctor called a NAPRO doctor that knows how to read these charts and order
Ooh.
blood work based on the phases of the cycle on the Creighton chart. So I started doing that just to kind of understand my hormones because I knew as an endometriosis patient, even though I felt well, hormonal imbalances are a big deal that affect
Yeah.
a lot of us. And I, unfortunately, for a very long time, suffered with PMDD. And PMDD, for those who don't know what it is a
Mhm.
very, very severe form of PMS that can last up to 10, 14 days before your period, where it is like PMS on steroids. And I suffered with it for a couple of years. So I did the
Yeah.
Creighton charting for that, but also because when my husband and I had gotten married, for the first year or so of our marriage, we actually it because it helps you track your fertile window, it helps you avoid pregnancy or achieve pregnancy if that's what you're trying to do. And we were in a phase where we were trying to avoid pregnancy as a newly married couple. So I
Yeah.
was using it for that, but also to just understand how my hormones were. And I mean, I still do it because it's helpful and it gives me hard data to show to when I do see my NAPRO doctor, who is not my OBGYN. It's a totally different situation. And in 2022, I noticed that my charts were looking pretty bad again. I know I mentioned it before where I was starting to have symptoms again, where I made drastic lifestyle changes to
Yeah.
help with my cycles. And I noticed that my fertile window was like 3 or 4 days. And it really it was not good. And I was having, cycle spotting and all of these things. So I ended up going for an ultrasound and they found an endometrioma the size of a lime on my left ovary, and then another one the size of a grape. Had a fibroid, and then they diagnosed me with PCOS. I only had 3 symptoms of PCOS. One of them was string of pearl appearance, the short fertile window, cystic acne, and I was borderline insulin resistant. But like the recommendations that they gave me for diet and lifestyle, it didn't resonate with me. I was like, I don't know, this doesn't sound right. So I
Yeah.
did the exact opposite of what was on the recommendation. The PCOS was reversed in 4 months. I don't have the string of pearl appearance anymore. But what I did was, and to kind of get that to happen, I basically got rid of a lot of endocrine disrupting harsh chemicals from my home and kind of swapped heavy duty chemicals for more low toxin, non-toxic cleaners in my house, even down to like what I put on my body, in my body,
Yeah.
shampoos, such. Just based on what I've learned about how endocrine disruption can affect especially the estrogen levels in the body. And I knew that
Yeah.
endometriosis and estrogen, like it's all tied in. But I didn't go on any heavy duty medications or anything like that. I didn't go back on birth control. I'm not into any sort of shots or uh, other medications that certain companies try to push. It's just not an avenue that I was willing to go down. One, because
Yeah.
I feel like I was even at the point where I needed that. But two, I just wanted to really just deal with my the hormonal aspect of it. And then from a fertility standpoint, because after that, I noticed that it was kind of, because my fertile window was short, now we're dealing with infertility as a couple, which is something that I need to deal with, which is a whole other journey in and of itself, even aside
Yeah.
from, even though it's tied in a lot.
It is a lot. And it makes so much sense though. Like all of it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And again, this is not, I should probably say this is not me bashing. Like we're not bashing
No, of
medicine or anything like
course
that.
not.
Like I feel like I've talked a lot about my one bad seed doctor, but I have found good doctors and like there are good doctors. Um, Unfortunately, though, none of my doctors have mentioned anything about, like endocrine disruptors in like our cleaning products or plastics or anything like that. But we know, like, the research is there that those things do disrupt our hormones. Um, Especially, growing up in the 2000s and like microwaving
Yeah.
plastic all the
Yeah.
time. Like
Yeah.
that's something that's known that it could disrupt your hormones. So,
Exactly.
and then typically people with endometriosis have high estrogen levels and like a little bit of resistance to progesterone.
Mhm.
So it would make a lot of sense if we're disrupting our hormones further that we would have worse symptoms.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that that aspect on it is a really, really good idea. And I'm like slowly trying to shift away from that stuff. But it
Yeah,
gets difficult too when
it
you
does.
I feel like I'm getting to the point in my life where like I work a full-time job now, so I have a little bit more money. Like
Yeah.
I can start to change out cleaning products and like buy
Yeah.
better shampoos and like makeup and stuff. But when you're 19, 20 in college and you have like $20, you can't
Exactly.
just go
Exactly.
buy the cheap stuff that you can get from the dollar store.
It's so
So,
true.
yeah, it's definitely a struggle in itself. So I did want to ask you a little bit about your infertility journey.
Yeah.
And I know that that can be very, very personal and very, very challenging. So you can answer these or not answer them however you want to. But when did that experience kind of start for you, and like how has that gone? How have you went
Yeah.
about it?
So I will take you back. So I've been married since 2019, end of June 2019. So less than a
Oh, it's
year prior
almost
to the
your
pandemic,
yeah, it's
almost
almost your
5 years.
anniversary.
Yeah. And like I mentioned earlier, the first year, first 6 months to a year, we wanted to just avoid pregnancy.
Hmm.
Um, we had just moved into a new place, like getting adjusted to married life.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic happened about how many months
Yeah.
after? Less than a year after.
Yeah.
And my husband worked in live events. That was his professional job.
Oh.
So the events industry evaporated overnight. And
Hmm.
so he didn't have a job when that happened. So that kind of extended our avoid pregnancy journey
Hmm.
until he, a couple of months of unemployment in the beginning of the pandemic, got a new job, everything was solid. And then we're like, all right, like what we're going to do is we're just going to YOLO. We're not going to try. We're going to YOLO. And if it happens, thank God. And, if it doesn't, we're at peace with that.
Hmm.
So that was kind of how the journey started. It wasn't like, okay, it wasn't so formal. Like, okay, let's start trying. Like some people do
Yeah.
that. I'm a spiritual person. I trust God. I'm kind of like, all right, God, like if you want it to happen,
Yeah.
great. If you don't, that's okay too. But I do understand that everyone's journey is different and a lot of people experience immense grief.
Hmm.
So essentially what happened with me was we were YOLOing and I wasn't getting pregnant. And I was like looking at my charts, and my
Hmm.
charts were kind of getting progressively worse. About 6 to 8 months in, I have an appointment with my NAPRO doctor, the one who reads my charts.
Right.
He mentioned to me that because of a certain phase of my cycle and how long it was after my peak ovulation day, even if I did get pregnant, I was at 100% risk of miscarriage because I had
Oh,
to adjust certain things, with the way that I was doing it. So
yeah.
I with that, I was obviously like I wasn't happy because even
Hmm.
though I wasn't experiencing immense grief, I was
Hmm.
frustrated because even aside from infertility, having endometriosis brings grief.
Right.
And so I was like, is my endo back? Like, what's going on? Even though I wasn't really feeling pain yet.
Yeah.
And so I made some changes. She did have me go on a natural progesterone for a little bit, but it made me feel very loopy that
Hmm.
I didn't want to take it anymore. And then as the time had gone by, now we're like 3 years in and we just don't have kids. And so I'm actually, while we're on this journey is when I found out about the giant endometrioma on my ovary, which made very clear sense to me that, okay, so that is possible of what's affecting the fertility.
Yeah.
But the other avenue too that I was experiencing was this fibroid. So I had a fibroid protruding into the uterine cavity
Hmm.
that it was like protruding into the uterine cavity.
Yeah.
And my endosurgeon, because I did go to my endosurgeon saying, what do you think? Should I consider surgery? I don't really want to go through surgery right now. I feel fine because these lifestyle changes that I made, but I'm not getting pregnant. What's going on?
Yeah.
So I ended up opting to have that fibroid removed last summer because they thought that was possibly the culprit. Because even though now, because I got removed all these endocrine disruptors, my cycle's fertile window was healthy again, there was no healthy pregnancy happening.
Right.
So I had the fibroid removed last July. I said, okay, if I don't get pregnant within 6 to 8 months, then I'll explore endosurgery. So they
Hmm.
removed the fibroid. They said that it was actually like protruding to block my right tube, which was
Oh,
actually my right ovary was the healthy ovary without the endometrioma on it.
yeah.
And so I was like, all right, well, maybe that's it. But here we are. I have no kids. Um, I'm not pregnant. So as even though like I physically feel great,
Hmm.
the thing about endometriosis is that some people don't even experience symptoms.
Yeah.
And the only symptom that they experience is infertility. I know many people actually who they didn't have extremely painful periods. They don't experience what you and I experience from endo, but their only symptom was infertility. They go have surgery, they have healthy pregnancies.
Yeah.
Now, with me and my journey is I'm not against having another surgery, especially now what I do know that if I proceed with a second surgery, I will handle my post-op diet and lifestyle a little differently than I did in 2015 when I just
Yeah.
didn't know better, like using harsh chemicals, drinking soy milk. Like I just
Mhm.
can't. I can't. I can't. The amount of soy I consumed when I was vegan, like just for my hormones, I can't believe I did it. And so I'm actually not and I know this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. And
Mhm.
there's one thing that I can say is your feelings are valid. If
Mhm.
you're frustrated, if you're feeling pain, give yourself the space. Even on social media, if some of your friends are posting pregnancy announcements, and if that hurts you,
Mhm.
meet them, do whatever you need to do. For me, I feel really grateful to God that I'm not at that point. But I do understand that a lot of people out there who are dealing with a similar journey are experiencing immense grief because of their longing for a child.
Yeah.
And so it's a tough thing.
Yeah, it is really, really hard. I can imagine. I mean, I'm not at that point yet
Yeah,
to start trying for
yeah,
kids, but I will say that it's definitely something that I've been afraid of for a long time, like
yeah,
getting diagnosed with endo so early and having this like not great OBGYN. And she also
yeah.
put some things in my head like pretty early on about, like endometriosis and infertility, like they typically happen with each other and whole bunch of stuff. So, I mean, like I said, my boyfriend and I have been together like since we were
Long
17,
time.
like a very long time. So he has kind of always heard me talk about these things, and like we both know that we're not ready for kids. Um,
Right,
and we want to wait like quite a while. Like we're not married yet. We want to have a
right.
marriage, have kids later on. But I'm not gonna lie, like in the back of my head, I am terrified that the longer we wait, the more
Mm,
difficult it will be for me. So I've also started, like I'm 26 now, I've started thinking about kind of doing some of the things that you've done in the past and taking out some of those hormone disruptors and just trying to understand my hormones a little bit more. So that way, when we are ready to start having kids, I've already
yeah,
kind of done those things and I don't have to like start then when we're already like
absolutely.
trying.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, it's actually very interesting. I was 23 with my
Hmm.
excision diagnostic surgery, and I was dating my husband at the time. We were only dating for about a year and a half.
Hmm.
And we were long distance, New York to Miami. So like
Oh,
long distance
wow.
relationship is, a little different.
Yeah.
Even though we knew we loved each other, it was just we didn't experience a relationship the way that someone who lives close to someone does. So he was amazing for me and there for me the whole time, but like you're only dating someone a year and a half. Do you know if they're your life partner? And do you
Yeah.
know, like these are things you have to think about and talk about? And I remember getting out of surgery being like, oh my gosh, my fertility, I don't know what's gonna happen. And I
Hmm.
like wasn't I I wasn't married. I wasn't even
Hmm.
trying, obviously, but like it's just something that, comes with the disease. It's something that crosses your mind, like whether
Hmm.
or not you do want kids or not. It's just something that crosses your mind.
Yeah.
And it was a concern for me even then, but because I felt so well after my surgery, I kind of took it for granted, being like, oh, I'm fine now. But
Hmm.
here I am 9 years later, still dealing with the
Hmm.
effects and possibly even the return of my endo because the size of that endometrioma cyst, I mean, it's almost evident that I have lesions in
Yeah.
there based on the fact that I had those cysts.
Yeah. I know that I'm putting out baby dust for you.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. I appreciate that. And I'm at peace with whatever happens, but it is
mhm,
extremely frustrating because I
mhm,
talk to so many endo patients who are in serious dealing with serious grief, and it's sad to see.
I know. It really is. And I want to talk about it because I want like other people to know that a lot of people go through this and
Yeah.
like again, kind of it is a sensitive topic, but like even my boyfriend and I when we were like 21, I had like a breakdown. I was like maybe I should freeze my eggs, like
Yeah.
I don't know, and I just had all these thoughts going through my head because I'm like I have my
Yeah.
doctor constantly telling me all these things and I'm like maybe I should freeze my eggs and I should, like kind of protect that for later because we don't want to have kids until we're like 30. So
Right.
what are we doing? And I just remember him he's so funny.
Yeah.
Him looking at me and being like, however we're supposed to have a family is how it will happen. So
Exactly.
if if that means that eventually like you can't get pregnant and we don't have a baby naturally like that, then like adoption is a thing. And
Exactly.
if that is how we're supposed to have our family, then that's how it will happen. So
And that's how you know you found your life partner. When they,
yeah.
when they deal with you like that, because that's exactly the same thing that my husband said to me.
Yeah.
And it like kind of makes you emotional being like, well, thank you for caring so much and loving me through this shit.
I
Because I'm going
know.
to get teary-eyed over it right now, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
You were still pretty young when you started
Yeah.
dating him and we're going through this. And I know like for me too, it just like really solidified it. And we were so young and I was just like, I could have issues having kids. And if that's not something you want, you can like, you have an out.
Right.
It's okay. Like you
Yeah.
have an out in that. And of course, like back then he just like looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah.
So I love that you have a supportive partner too, because that really could make or break like
I
a
was,
whole situation.
it really changes the whole dynamic of how you deal with the disease too, like
Hmm.
versus partners that aren't so supportive. I'm so beyond grateful that my husband has like such a positive outlook towards things because I just sometimes I'll just like I won't say I spiral because I feel like that's an extreme, but like
Hmm.
I'll ruminate over, the process and not necessarily because of that we don't have children, but more just because of like, well, it's more of like a health obsession thing. Um, Obsession is a strong word, but I'm like, well, if it's
Yeah.
not happening, then what's wrong? Like, what do I
Yeah.
need to do? What's the next thing I gotta do? Like, this is just how my head thinks. And I'm like this in every aspect of my life, not
Hmm.
just my health. I'm like this at work. Like, okay, if something's wrong, what do we have to do? What do we gotta fix it? What do we do? So I get obsessed until I have
Yeah.
a solution. Um, Even when I'm dealing with real estate clients, they're like, oh my God, you really go at like you really I find solutions. So just having that, support system really helps so much.
I really do think that that makes or breaks a whole situation. And
Mhm.
especially when you're like having a chronic illness like endo can it, it it affects everything in your life, right? And like you can have like bad days or bad weeks where you just kind of feel like you are not in charge of your own body, which
Yeah.
is a really like weird experience to have.
Mhm.
And it's hard to stay positive in that sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think that having support, whether it's like with a partner or with your friends or family or something, like somebody to support you through that is super important. So
Yeah. Now, I do want to mention one very interesting thing, just because we're talking about the topic of support.
Mhm.
You and I are both extremely blessed and lucky to have, men in our life or a partner in our
Yeah.
life, that really is there for us and supports us. And there's a lot of patients that don't have that.
Yeah.
So what we have at the Endometriosis Coalition is we actually do virtual support groups once a month.
Ooh.
So it's really interesting. It's really amazing. Our therapist that manages it is incredible. She herself is an endo patient. And it's really just a like the support group. It's virtual because people from all 50 states or even
Mhm.
internationally can jump in depending on if the time works for them where
Mhm.
they're able to kind of just talk through what they're going through and have that support system of people who understand.
Yeah.
Um, yes, these people don't live with you, but like having that support system really makes all the difference in the world because a lot of
Mhm.
patients I speak with, they if they've been just diagnosed, they're like, okay, now I know physically what's going on, but now I need to mentally deal with this. Like, how do I
Yeah.
deal this. So that's a very helpful resource that has helped a lot of people. And it's
Yeah.
free.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask that as well. So what was it called again?
So it's if you go on the Endoco Instagram or even the
Mm-hmm.
website, there's the virtual support group tab. You sign up for the virtual support group. It will send you an email the week of the support group, and then we'll
Okay.
send you an email an hour out with a link to basically sign on. It's a Google Meet right now.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's just once a month for an hour, and it's really great.
Okay. Beautiful. I will also link that in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, I think that that'll be really helpful to a lot of people. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Before we start to wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom to share with anyone?
Yes, I know I mentioned it before, but
Hmm.
whenever someone asks me this question, because I do get this question a lot, is if you don't have the answers that you need because you're
Hmm.
listening to your body, be your own advocate, whether it's, a friend that doesn't believe you, a doctor that doesn't believe you. You
Hmm.
know your body better than anyone else, and don't stop fighting until you get the answers that you need.
Yes, very well said. I
Thank you.
1000%
I had to
agree.
live it, so I had to live it myself. It's the best advice I can give.
I love that. You have been amazing. Thank you so, so much. Oh, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram or my
Hmm.
website, Meg Connolly, Megnolly. You can link it in the show notes or
Yeah.
however you want. So my website, all of my socials are linked on my website, or that is my Instagram handle as well, where I cover
Okay.
a lot of these topics.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. I think that
Thank you, Lexi.
a lot of people will really love this. And yeah, thank you so much. You
Thank you,
seriously,
Lexi.
you're an inspiration.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.